With the city of Rome in flames and Visigoth forces running rampant in the heart of Italy, the situation looks dire for the empire. While Emperor Honorius would be able to reassert a degree of control, the sack of Rome was a huge blow to both his prestige and that of the Western Roman Empire as a whole. Over the next 4 decades, Rome's stability continued to unravel, with uprisings by provincial governors, more succession-based strife, and the devastating loss of critical provinces such as North Africa, whose grain supplies, especially from Carthage, had long sustained Rome. Attempts were made to stem the tide, but by this point, the troubles facing Rome were almost unbearable, and this would only increase. Emperor Honorius, whose reign was already precarious, looked to be dealt a mortal blow with the sack of Rome. Alaric's Gothic forces only left the burning city when they saw fit, and not as a result of military pressure from Honorius, who by this time was holed up in Ravenna, largely as a result of barbarian threats. The empire's military was simply stretched too thin by this point. Honorius clung on to power, but crisis followed crisis, this time in the form of a usurper in Gaul. Possibly sensing weakness in the wake of the devastating Visigoth campaign into Italy, Constantine III had been agitating against Honorius and ruling semi-independently in Roman Britain. By 411 AD, it became clear the situation needed a resolution, so Honorius dispatched his new and capable general Constantius to deal with the threat. Eventually, he forced his surrender. Despite promises of safe passage, Constantine and his son were executed. Their heads were sent to Honorius in a gruesome display of restored authority, thus temporarily ending the threat from Gaul. While the challenge from Constantine had been dealt with, Honorius would not be granted much breathing space. This time, Heraclianus, the governor of Rome's North African provinces, attempted another revolt in 412 AD. He was another capable general who felt he had been overlooked with the elevation of Constantius to the key military figure of the Western Empire. Honorius's badly damaged reputation and authority likely also contributed to his decision to revolt. Heraclianus initially stopped vital grain shipments to Rome from Carthage under his control, a taste of the same approach the Vandals would employ in the coming decades. He then prepared a fleet to travel with his troops from North Africa to Italy. In March 413 AD, he landed near Rome to face Honorius. And while source material is lacking for the encounter, it's believed he was overwhelmed by Honorius's superior numbers, and he made a hasty retreat back to his North African territory. Here at Carthage, shortly after, he was murdered. Despite Heraclianus's revolt being quickly put down by General Constantius, it speaks to the broader disintegration of the empire at this point, as provincial authorities often became more autonomous and looked beyond the authority of Rome. This was especially true in possessions such as Hispania and Britain, where Rome's central authority had been rapidly waning for a considerable period of time now. The Vandals, for example, would almost completely push Roman forces out of Hispania, claiming the territory as their own, following the Battle of Tarraco between King Gunderic and Western Roman forces. The weakening of the empire can be further seen in Honorius's granting of land in Aquitaine of modern-day France to the Visigoths in 418 AD. This went further than the agreements and foederati status given by previous emperors to barbarians, and, in effect, allowed a largely hostile force to establish their own kingdom within reach of Italy. No more than 200 years before, Rome was shedding blood to maintain its border with barbarian tribes as far away as eastern Germany. Now, the same enemies were establishing kingdoms in the heart of the empire. This isn't to cast unfair blame on Honorius. Though his authority was greatly weakened by this point, these arrangements were undoubtedly a recognition of Rome's inability to militarily face all the threats across the empire. However, they still had the effect of greatly accelerating the speed of the Western Empire's fall and also setting the template for the future kingdoms which would rule over the lands of the former Western Roman Empire. Despite being granted land and power, this did not even effectively pacify the Visigoths, with them breaking the peace and pushing out from their territory in Aquitaine to besiege Arles in 425 AD. Led by their new king, Theodoric I, the Visigoths would not be successful this time. The capable Roman general Aetius was able to put down the invasion, with Theodoric accepting new peace terms. The incursion demonstrates again, though, Rome's weak position, where even generous terms offered by it were not enough to satisfy external forces like the Visigoths. Meanwhile, in the east, Honorius' nephew Theodosius II had ruled as sole emperor since the death of his father Arcadius in 408 AD. Becoming emperor as a child and effectively controlled by influential figures of the court, he could not act as a figure of stability for the empire. Supposedly under the influence of his court advisor Chrysaphius, he sought to make peace with the aggressive Huns. This was a costly policy which did nothing to secure the territory of the Eastern Empire at the same time as significant portions of the West were being lost to barbarian groups. The Huns would continue to pose a threat through the period, eventually exerting pressure on the eastern capital of Constantinople itself, a testament to the failure of Theodosius II's policy. Alongside his military weakness, Theodosius did also carry out significant reforms in the civil and religious areas with the Theodosian Code, a compilation of laws enacted over the previous period. This ambitious project collected the laws and decrees of emperors and senates dating back to 312 AD and Constantine the Great's embrace of Christianity. Its aim was to simplify the legal code and also cement the place of Orthodox or Nicene Christianity, which was still facing challenges from the insurgent Arian variety. It was a comprehensive project taking nearly a decade, and which succeeded in providing a simplified set of laws for both the East and West. Though it did little to slow the decline of the empire, it demonstrated the continuing ability of the state to embark on broad administrative projects and would set a template for legal documents and dissemination of laws into the early medieval era. Honorius would die in 423 AD, leaving behind a chaotic situation. Ioannis attempted and claimed the title of Western Emperor for 2 years, but was eventually put down by Theodosius from the east. He was eventually replaced by Valentinian III, son of Honorius' favorite general, Constantius. The two would go on to co-rule East and West together for the remainder of Theodosius' life. During the early years of Valentinian III's reign, it was largely his mother, Galla Placidia, making the decisions of state, due to him being a minor. Despite this, though, serious efforts were made to reorganize European defenses as well as the repair of the functioning of the state, albeit severely limited due to lacking resources by this time. This short Romance period wouldn't continue for long, and in 429 AD, the Vandals, another Germanic tribal group, traveled south from territory they were occupying in Hispania to North Africa to begin a campaign there. What followed their crossing of the Strait of Gibraltar was a ferocious conquest. Along with their allies, the Alans, they pushed eastward from modern-day Morocco, sacking and pillaging Roman territory. This was a terrible situation for Rome, as North Africa was a key source of both revenue and food supplies. It had long remained a prosperous and stable part of the empire, requiring a small fraction of Roman military forces to defend it, yet providing a bounty in return. Earlier Roman sources emphasized North Africa's importance, with some claiming it supplied Rome for much of the year. Governor of the region Bonifatius tried to muster a defense, but the Roman forces were simply too depleted to effectively face this Vandal army. By 430, The Vandals were pushing still further east into modern-day Algeria, already possessing everything to the west. Here, they would besiege Hippo Regius for over a year before retreating due to lack of supplies. Commander of the defenses, Bonifatius, would withdraw to Rome to muster forces, allowing the Vandals to eventually return and take the outpost. Bonifatius would be mortally wounded at the hands of rival general Flavius Aetius at the Battle of Ravenna before he could return, though, again demonstrating the chaotic state of affairs in the Roman Empire by this point. Just as a key area of territory is under heavy attack, threatening food supplies to the empire, key generals are embroiled in a civil war to gain a greater share of power. This was not a viable platform to mount a defense, and demonstrates the risk of having generals possessing so much power, as was seen in these later years of the Western Roman Empire. Partly as a result of the chaotic internal environment, Rome sought peace with the Vandals in 435 AD. They agreed to accept foederati status in return for much of the lands they had already captured. This was similar to the Visigoths in 418 AD, another parcelling out of a chunk of land by Rome to a barbarian tribe. However, as if to demonstrate the weakness of Rome's position in these years and the regard in which terms were held by their enemies, the Vandals resumed their campaign in 439 AD, launching a surprise attack on the vital Roman city of Carthage. It fell without significant resistance, and with it, Rome's export point for the majority of its North African grain supplies. The economic hit was severe, and alongside the already increasing tax burden on citizens in Rome's remaining provinces, only served to further alienate large segments of the population. The Vandal campaign would continue even beyond Carthage, as they eventually launched a naval invasion of Sicily. Only then, in 442 AD, would a more lasting peace agreement be concluded between the two parties, this one on terms even more favorable to the Vandals. The period draws to a close with the Roman Empire in a severely weakened state. Militarily, it is unable to face the numerous threats across the empire and is given to portioning out significant areas of territory through peace agreements with enemies such as the Goths, who it can no longer defeat. In other areas of the empire, large parts of North Africa had now been lost to the Vandals through their campaign of the last decade, and with it, full control of a crucial food export hub in Carthage. This sequence of blows made it extremely difficult to raise the required tax revenue to fund the costs of the state, and crucially, the military. This helped create a vicious cycle where citizens of the fading empire were asked to contribute more in taxes to plug the shortfall, which in turn bred discontent and created conditions ripe for unrest. All of this just prior to the re-emergence of the threat from the Huns around 440 AD under their fearsome leader Attila. Although the final collapse of the Western Roman Empire would not occur for another 3 decades, all of the contributing factors were now well and truly in place. The final nails in the empire's coffin were being hammered in, one by one. Big thanks to our amazing patrons for making this video possible. Your support means the world to us. If you'd like to help us keep creating and get early access to our videos, behind-the-scenes content, and other perks, consider becoming a member right here on YouTube or joining us on Patreon. Every bit of support helps. And as always, thank you so much for watching.